Welcome to the NWI.com Political Roundtable for Thursday, May 29th. I'm Robert Blaskowitz, Assistant Managing Editor of The Times. Joined with me today, Doug Ross, Editorial Page Editor of The Times, and Krista Zivanovic, Assistant Managing Editor of The Times. Lots to talk about, especially kind of related to trains. There's a lot of train-related news. Most notably on our front page today, we had showcased South Shore unveiling its 20-year plan, which will include not only the extension to Dyer, but also some substantial improvements for the existing line along the lakeshore.
Right, and that's, really, we all know what the Westlake Corridor is. It takes the train to where the people are. But really, a really crucial aspect to this is just speeding up the existing route. Mm-hmm. So they're talking about things like, in South Bend, for instance, the terminus of the railroad is at the South Bend Airport. So to leave the airport by South Shore, you go east and curve around. So they're talking about a project that will, reroute that instead of, taking that reverse C shape. Then you just take a more direct route to get there, and that will save 10 minutes, just in that. And that's really the key. We were talking about this at a South Shore meeting this morning in Chesterton, and part of the when you look at the speed of Amtrak leaving Union Station in Chicago and getting to Milwaukee, it's 86 miles and it takes 89 minutes, as I recall, to get there. So pretty much the same distance as South Bend, but it takes 2 hours and 10 minutes on the South Shore. So they really got to speed that up. They're talking about putting in another set of tracks between, where they end basically in Gary. They'd put in another set of tracks to Dune Park. And so that would speed it. They would, do simple things like, just skipping some of the stations for some of the trains, and just, say 5-10 minutes at a stop. Well, there you go. That's made the trip all that much faster.
Right. And they're talking about trying to go from 12,000 riders now to 20,000, I think.
Right,
talking about.
Exactly. And if they get 20,000 riders on a weekday, then that puts them up to, which is pretty feasible, I think, with all of this. That puts them up to the levels they were in World War II, when you had, tires were rationed, gas was rationed, and people were forced to go onto the trains. So if you can get up to 20,000, that's really a remarkable accomplishment.
Yeah, it was a force to be reckoned with. I know we recently re-looked at the history of the South Shore, and I highly recommend readers to go online and look at the history of it. It really was a force to be reckoned with. We nearly lost it in the 70s, and I think all you need to do to see the value of it is to look west to Illinois and see how all of those suburbs, people live in Crystal Lake. They live in far, far away and commute to the city because they have great metro access. And I think that I can't see why it would be different for Indiana. People complain about negative influences along the stops, and I just don't see how that would happen. I think with our lower taxes and good schools in a lot of communities, I think we would see an influx of people who would move in, increase our tax base, add some interesting luster and diversity to our communities. And
so here's one of the impacts is the people who did the survey found that the average salary being brought home now by South Shore riders, and keeping in mind this is the average, is $80,000 a year.
Thank you.
Those jobs
I rest my case.
Really,
exactly.
really well.
Exactly.
In Chicago, downtown Chicago, there are twice as many jobs as in Lake
those are
Porter
people
combined.
that will spend that money here
Exactly.
at local businesses.
Right.
Exactly.
And so that's where the local economic impact is. On the subject of passenger rail, we have Governor Pence in town today. He's doing a bunch of things. Among the things he's doing is kind of an event for the Amtrak route through Northwest Indiana. and trying to speed
Porter
that
Junction,
as well. The
right.
Porter Junction, where there's so much train traffic right there. If you've ever been through that area of Porter, it's difficult to go between Porter and Chesterton without hitting a train.
Well, my wife is in a community band, the Valparaiso Community University Concert Band, and so they do a concert every year at Centennial Park in Chesterton, and it's an hour-long concert made all the longer by listening to about 6 trains blow through during that time, and that's really common. What they really need to do is they need to clear up. This is the one bottleneck, the main bottleneck for getting high-speed rail between Chicago and Detroit. Now we're talking passenger service there, but think of what that's going to mean for freight as well. You're going to speed that through. You won't be stuck at the crossing as long. I mean, it's going to be a real huge improvement.
Yeah, and Governor Pence is also among the other things he's doing. He's was in LaPorte this morning with the announcement of expansion at Alcoa there. That's going to add, I think, 329 jobs. They said by 2019. So that's a big economic expansion. And then he's also speaking on his health care, something we've talked about
be at
in
IUN,
previous
speaking on
shows.
Yep.
Yeah, talking about his effort to expand the Healthy Indiana plan. In place of expanding Medicaid. So.
And he's really pushing that. I think his deadline to submit it or a deadline to find out, I can't remember which, is sometime in June. So he's really pushing that. And we have a story today by Dan Carden, our State House Bureau Chief, talking about Pence really shrugged off his conservative critics and said, I think this is the way to go. It's a good compromise. I've got bipartisan support. So...
Well, and the interesting thing is,
let's see what he has to say today.
He's speaking right where the Indiana University School of Medicine, one of the largest in the country, has a new, relatively new 4-year program. It was 2 years, got expanded a few years back, and so now you're going to need this sort of thing to be able to produce the number of doctors. They're adding a nurse practitioner program. You're going to need that, because.
And you certainly have the patient base there in
Exactly.
Gary with, I'm sure a lot of people there comprise the 300,000 Hoosiers without health insurance who could benefit from seeing those doctors. And if we get a teaching hospital there, the hospital could benefit from research and
as long as you're at it, let's
patients.
get the trauma center built.
Right.
Finally.
Yeah. And also on the subject of Governor Pence, Doug, you're writing in your column about something that Governor Pence isn't doing, which he is not basically signing Indiana on to the federal requirements. That's the federal program that is aiming to reduce prison rape and prison sexual assault.
Right, and my column's moving to Sunday, starting this weekend, which I should point out for anybody that is expecting to read it next Friday. Sorry, it'll be a Sunday, but
I already read it, and it's excellent.
Well, thank you. So here's the deal. There's this in 2003. Congress passed the Federal Prison Rape Elimination Act. That's what it's called. 2012. The Justice Department finally got the standards together for this, and we found out that Indiana is not in compliance. Indiana's put some money into it, but it means things like not having somebody of the opposite sex watch an inmate while they're changing clothes, for instance. The more skin you see, the more you're creating opportunities for trouble, basically. And so. There's a federal report that was 2012 said that in Indiana, 10.4% of those in detention in state facilities were raped or sexually assaulted, and those are just the juveniles. And that's an improvement from Pendleton a few years back, the juvenile facility there. More than 36% of the juveniles that were housed there had been raped or sexually assaulted in the previous 12 months.
And we're talking juveniles.
We're talking juveniles.
Right.
So I talked to a state representative, Christina Hale, who's been,
someone who was on our show.
Exactly.
A couple months ago. Yeah.
And so she's originally from Michigan City, now in Indianapolis. Democrat down there, and so she's working on legislation that would, realizing that it would be expensive to, deal with this for adults. Let's focus initially on just the juveniles. She figures about $7 million ought to cover it for additional staff and some other, changes at facilities. And so she's looking to try to get some of the state legislators up here to support her and, getting the additional money together to protect these children. When you think, Lake County had last year 108 kids enter the state prison system, and if you figure 10.4% of those are going to be, assaulted, that's pretty sad. I mean,
and when you think that those who are assaulted often turn into then assaulters in turn, it's a bigger issue, I think, than just. Which is horrific enough.
It's compounding the problem, which we know Indiana already has more severe problem than the average state does.
And as Hale said in your column, the chat you had with her, we don't want prison to be necessarily a comfy, cushy place, but it should at least be a safe place.
Right. And look what we're facing in Lake County with the jail. Lake County is spending millions of dollars to get out from under this federal consent decree, but that basically dealt with overcrowding and conditions at the jail,
and a lot of health conditions.
Exactly. And so look at the liability the state's facing by not complying with this.
Right.
So,
and that might be what it takes, which would really be too bad, because then it might cost more than the $7 million that she's proposing as a start.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, before we end this week, we really should note it's a bit of the end of an era here at the Times. Executive editor William Nangle. This is his final week as executive editor. He's retiring. Good for him. Luckily for us, he will be remaining as in kind of an emeritus role,
right?
Writing columns.
He'll be in the community. You'll see him around.
Yeah, he'll still be around here,
right.
Part time as well. But it's been a privilege, I can say for myself, to be able to work with him for these past 2 decades, and you both have worked with him for a long time
plus
as well.
Years, exactly.
And
17 years.
And it's a tribute to him.
Yes.
What the growth that we've seen at the Times, and in an era of where newspapers are shrinking and going through crises, the Times continues to grow, continues to evolve, and show strength in the community. And it's an important. I think I'm biased, of course, but I think it's an important element of the community, and Bill really has been instrumental in strengthening the Times.
And to his
position.
credit, I would just like to add that he really moved with the times. He was very progressive, and if he didn't know or understand the technology at first, he made sure we got people in here who did and moved forward. And it's really a credit to him, not just the substantive journalism that he pushed all of us to do, but also kept up with the times and kept it strong.
And he's done a lot for Northwest Indiana as well.
Absolutely.
So, and frankly, for Indiana, he led the State of Secrecy project that did an audit of.
Good point.
In all 92 counties, did an audit of how well they complied with the
request
access
for
to public
records.
records. Exactly. And as a result of that project, then Governor Frank O'Bannon created the position of public access counselor, just to have a sounding board for government officials and for members of the public and journalists to be able to get better compliance with that law. So that's a big credit to Bill.
Very much so. That's all the time we have. We thank you for watching. We'll be back next week with another Political Roundtable.